Hello and welcome to this part 2 tutorial from Blender Cookie over the spider creation. My name is David Ward and we're going to go ahead and finish up, or try to finish up, our little spider guy here. Last time when I left you, we had just set up his texture map, and as you can see, it looks okay. But one thing we can do to make it look a little bit better, not just the texture map but the render itself, is let's add an empty in here. Shift A and add an empty, and I need to go ahead and start my display here, I guess. There we go. Okay, I'm going to grab the camera and then shift select the empty that we just created, Control T, track 2, and we're going to use this to position the camera to look at the spider a little bit better. A little easier to navigate around your scene this way too. You can just look through the camera and grab that empty and move it around, and the camera will constantly follow it. Okay, so let's set it over here, and then maybe bring the camera up at a little bit different angle. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to set my lighting up a little bit here. Let's grab this light here and turn it into a spotlight and change the fall off to inverse linear. There we go. And let's change the shadows to buffer shadows. Actually, you know what? For right now, I'm going to leave it on ray shadow, and I want to show you what difference buffer shadows and ray shadows make when you're using the particle hair like we're going to use here in just a second. Let me add another empty in here and have the light track to that. There we go. So I can kind of do the same thing, have it pointing directly at the spider there. Okay. Now let's turn on a little bit of ambient occlusion. Boom. Let's put it way down to 0.15. 0.15. My numlock button was not on for some reason. There we go. Okay. One more thing I want to do just to make things prettier is add a mesh plane in here. I'm going to put it under our spider. That's going to be a ground plane. And move it on up until it's sitting right there under his feet. Okay. And now I want to give it a material setting for only shadow. You've seen this done before, but I'm going to throw in a special little trick here that I discovered on the Blender Artist forums about this particular problem. And that's if we have shadows only and we render it out, you can kind of see some shadows, but not really as dark as they should be. And the reason that is because we have that ambient occlusion turned on. And it kind of works kind of strangely. If we have it set way up high, say 1.0, it'll throw a shadow a little more visible. Actually, let's turn that to approximate. Do that again. You can see it throws a little bit darker shadow. But I don't want the whole ambient area to be lit up quite that much. I want to keep it really low so we have our definite light source coming from the top right. So now if we render, you can see a little bit different. Kind of lights up those areas on the inside, maybe make that 0.2. But again, it's not throwing a very good shadow. So one setting you can turn on to get the shadows to show up on this plane, even though ambient occlusion is turned on, is you come over here to the materials. Remember, down here we use shadows only. Scroll all the way up to shading and set the ambient. It changes the amount of global ambient color on the material that the material receives. So change that to 0. And now when we render, we still get that nice ground effect of, an endless plane if we were to change the world settings to blend sky to where it has a darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. Let's make that a little bit brighter. There we go. You can get that endless ground plane when you render, but it also still throws that shadow on the floor really nice and dark. So, okay, so that's just that. That's a way to get the scene set up a little bit better. Okay, so now let's jump in and start playing with some particle hair. So I'm going to go over to grab your spider, go over to your particle settings, hit the little plus sign, and let's just go ahead and name this spider Fuzzy. Okay, change the type to hair. And it puts it on there, but it's really long, so we need to go to the Advanced tab. Go ahead and check that off. Scroll down here to Velocity. Change that normal way down, really, really way down, to about 0.05. That's a little bit too. 0.05. There we go. For some reason I typed in 0.01. Okay, so that's that's pretty good. That'll probably work. Might even that might be a little long. So let's try 0.03. That's probably good right there. And now we will go ahead and scroll down here to render settings and have it set to material 1. Let me change, or let's go to our material settings here. And actually, I guess we need to give the spider, oh, okay, go to the correct material. There we go. Name this one spider texture. Go ahead and save this real quick. Spider 2B. There we go. Okay. So now back to grab your spider texture material. Go back to the texture settings. And let's add a new one in here, right there below texture. So actually name that one texture map. There we go. Add a new one down here, new, and change it to blend. And come down here to check show alpha. And under colors, go ahead and check ramp. And select this far right side here, the white color, check in there. And let's go ahead and make it black and set the alpha, all the way down to 0. And then select this side. So you can see a really little white line right there. And change the alpha up to maybe about 0.65. There we go. You can see a nice gradation. And now we need to come down here to mapping and change the coordinates to strand/particle. And even further down, take it off of color and set it to alpha right there. Now we will go back to the material settings and go ahead and turn on the type of preview render alpha, or the strand render there. And let's go to transparency. Go ahead and check that off and set the alpha all the way down to 0. And now we'll go down to strand settings and set the root, leave it at 1, and change the tip all the way down as far as it'll go, which is 0.25. So now it's going to kind of render a triangular shape of a hair strand. So I think we're pretty well ready to, well, we could render now, but it won't look really good because we don't have our particle hair children set up. So let's scroll down here on your Particles tab all the way down to Children and go ahead and expand that. And let's use Interpolated. What Interpolated is it kind of does an average angular area of each parent strand that's already on there. And speaking of, we need to go back up to Render and change that to Strand Render. And go ahead and check B-Spline. This helps it render a little faster. Okay, so since it's a wild animal, it's going to have a little bit of randomness to its fuzz. It's not going to be all the same length. So let's back up under Render. Go ahead and set random all the way up to 1. Okay, then we'll scroll down here. Give it a little bit of clumpiness, not too much, just a little bit. About 0.2 will be fine. And the shape a little bit as well. 0.2 also will be fine there. Roughness, let's give it a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. There we go. And size, we can probably just leave that as is pretty much. Maybe just a little bit bigger. And then some randomness in here as well. Okay. Now, since we gave it that the strand material, we're still having it set to material 1, which is the spider's texture map. So we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and give her a quick render just to see what it looks like. I'll get a sip of my iced tea. And okay, that's looking pretty good right out of the box. The only problem I can see is some of that transparency is leaking through onto the mesh below. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go back to our Materials tab. And let's go ahead and add a new one down here. And let's click on the little material ball there. Let's go ahead and say Spider Texture again. Let's make this a little bigger. And hit the 2 right there, because it's saying we have it in there twice. It's applied twice. So we need to rename it to, so we hit the 2, it creates a copy rather than what's the word I'm looking for? Instance of that texture. So we'll say Spider Texture Fuzzy. Okay. Now let's go back up to the original spider texture and turn off transparency. And then go ahead and go to our texture settings, or texture tab under that material, and go ahead and get rid of that blend texture that we put on there. So that should be good to go. And now go back to the spider texture fuzzy, still good. Okay, go to our particle settings. Go down to the render settings. Instead of material 1 now, we're going to be using that third material that we just created, so make it material 3. Okay, so now when we render, the base mesh should still be completely visible, but the fuzzies should be right there along with it. So there we go. That's looking pretty decent. I'd like to give quite a bit fuzzier. I'd like to make it quite a bit fuzzier. So let's do this. Go down to our children settings, and right now it's rendering 100 children for every parent. So let's bump that up. Let's try 500. See how well that does. You got to be careful when you're messing with the children, because if you get too high, it'll make Blender crash, make your computer crash, because it's eating too much RAM, too much resources, and things like that. So, but if you check the strand render like we did before in the B-spline, that really helps out in that situation. So we got 500 children now. Let's see what it looks like. Take it a second to render. I'll take another sip of tea. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause. Okay, there it goes. I was about to pause the recorder so you didn't have to sit there and watch the blank screen. Okay, well that's looking quite a bit better. And I think I like it. Okay, now, like I was talking about before, the difference between the buffered shadows and the ray trace shadows as far as these particle hairs go. Look at this and observe it, and it looks pretty decent. It looks touchable almost. It's nice and fuzzy looking. But tell you what, let's do. Let's zoom out here, and let's grab that light. Go over to our light settings, and turn it to buffer shadows. Let's change some of the settings down here under that. Make that 4000, the size. And the bias, let's make that way lower. Let's do 0.05. Okay, and we'll go ahead and save. I like to save every time before I do a render with any type of particles in it or anything, because I've been known to crash during that. But anyway, so we changed the... Okay, I just hit F11 to show you that render again. Nice and fuzzy. Now we've changed it to buffer shadows. Let's do a render there. F12 renders, by the way. It's not showing that up in this window right now, but take it just a second here. And you can already tell a difference to where in between, you can see in between the hairs where they're throwing shadows on themselves and everything. So in my opinion, buffer shadows give a more accurate shadow throwing as far as particles go. And you can also tell on the ground shadow that was thrown. Before, it was just the shadow of the mesh. Now we've got the fuzzy in there as well. Okay, now this looks pretty decent as is, but one thing we can do to make it look a little bit better, and let's escape out of there. And before going any further, let me jump to my render settings. And I like to render to a new window, a little pop-up. Usually I hate pop-ups, but in this instance, I prefer them. So anytime we render now, it'll pop up a new window. So let's go ahead and escape out there. Just go ahead and close that. Escape out of it. It's got to process and then say, oh, okay, now you can escape. Okay, there we go. Okay, like I was saying, a little bit we can do to make that fuzziness look a little bit better. Let's go to particle mode and scroll up here, grab the comb, set the strength down a little bit, and radius is probably fine about where it is. Make it a little smaller maybe. And go down here to your particle settings down here in the bottom. You can click and drag that with your middle mouse wheel, or middle mouse button, whatever you happen to have, and click on the particle select tip select right there. And now we're going to go in here. Let me go ahead and clear off this, or collapse that side. There we go. Don't really need it anymore. And let's just lightly brush these parent hairs in the direction of growth, as it were. So they're kind of just growing along the legs, and then here on the body, kind of brush them back. on the head and abdomen, whatever that's called. I thought I was done worrying about the names of them. But okay, and then on the little mandibles, kind of just sweep them forward, and then let's go to our side view. Gonna do the same thing. Kind of brush down the direction of the part of the body that they're on. There we go. And let's get in here and get these mandibles coming down here. Okay, maybe just along the side of the head thing there. Okay. So now, if we come out of particle mode, back to object mode, you should see that the hairs are kind of pointing like we combed them a little bit better now. So now let's take a peek at our render before 11. Oh, I canceled out that render, so it just has a black screen. So let's go ahead and hit F12 now. We'll render out a new one. And I'll go ahead and pause the recorder and so you don't have to sit there this whole time. So stand by, be right back. Okay, now it's starting to record. And you can already see it looks quite a bit better there on the mandibles and the legs so far. I'll say quite a bit. I don't know if it's quite a bit better, but it is a little better at least. And then on the body it looks a little better too. Now I'm seeing it looks like some bald spots here on the top of the head and the top of the body part. So one thing we can do is we can kind of play with the combing again. Grab the spider first and jump into particle mode. And let's look at that again, F11 to bring that pop-up up. Looks like we had some bald spots there on the leg. Just that leg there and maybe that leg. So let's kind of play with that. Got that cleaned up a little bit there. And then let's comb this up just a little. Hit the period button to center it up in the viewport. Another thing we can do to help the hairs from going into the body is change the deflect, where it deflects the emitter, which is the mesh. Let's change that up to 0.45. And now if we just kind of run our brush over it lightly, it kind of knocks them all into corresponding to that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. As far as the comb goes, look back to object mode. And tell you what, let's go to our particle settings again. Change the children up. Let's make it 750. Let's go 150% there. So we'll go ahead and save that. Go back to camera view. Pull up our viewport there, rendered viewport, and let's go ahead and render it again. And again, I'll go ahead and pause. Okay, now it's getting rendered out. And that helped a little bit, but it could also just be the angle of the camera versus the light and the sheen and things like that of the spider. So we'll consider that a scar. Maybe got in a battle with another spider or something, so he's got a scar there. So anyway, so that's the fuzziness aspect of our little tarantula guy. Let's call that part done. Go ahead and escape out, and let's go ahead and save. And for right now, I'm going to go ahead and go to still have my spider selected. I'm going to go to the modifier tab and go ahead and turn off the particle system as far as the viewport goes. It'll still render out, but we won't be able to see it there in the viewport. So now I'm going to build a quick little rig for the little guy. So let's hit Shift S to put our cursor to selected. Puts the 3D cursor right there on his little thorax area. And I'm going to Shift A, add an armature, single bone. And let's go to side view. And let's go over to our bones object settings, turn on X-ray, and let's go ahead and turn it to wire, and then go to the object data, the little guy standing there with his arms out, Vitruvian man, and let's turn on B-bone. Okay, so now we'll tab into edit mode for our little bone there, and let's turn it sideways and then bring it up. This will be the main head bone, as it were. Make it a little fatter. Control-Alt-S. Okay, and then Control-Alt-S-X. Makes it thicker along the X-axis. Now I'm going to grab that little piece there at the end, and I'm going to extrude out, on the Y-axis. There we go. Make that, I'm going to subdivide that and grab that middle piece, drag it down on the Y-axis right there. It's going to be kind of the waist area. And the reason I put that is so the thorax area can have a little bit of extra pieces. Let's see, deform segments, extra segments. So we'll set that to 4. So we come out of edit mode, you can see that it has segments. And since it's, let's turn that to pose mode. And since it's connected to this waist bone, it'll kind of deform when we move it around. And it's also deforming weird at the end because with these extra segments, it's kind of expecting to have another bone at the end. So let's turn the ease out off. There we go. So anytime we rotate around, it's gonna do it nicely. So let's kill that rotation. And let's go ahead and grab that waist bone and go ahead and parent it to the head. Keep the offset. There we go. Now anytime we move the head, the waist and the body follows along. Okay. Now we had 5 sections to our legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to do the same thing when we create the the leg bones. So let's jump back into armature mode or edit mode and put our 3D cursor, deselect that, just put our 3D cursor right there at the beginning of that first leg. I'm going to try something a little different as far as naming goes. Shift A. We're going to create this whole first leg, subdivide it 4 times to give us 5 segments. Okay. Grab the end of this. Actually, just grab that whole bone, move it down, line it up with that first foot, and then just kind of go through and line it up as it needs to go. And then go to top view, do the same thing, straighten it back up. Okay. Now let's grab each of these bones. They're all rotated oddly, so let's Control N, recalculate the bone roll on the Z-axis. So if we were to turn on, go to our object data settings, turn on the axes for each bone, you can see that the Z is now pointing up, which in this particular case, no. Okay, never mind. I thought this was going to be flipped the opposite way, but it's all good. So, okay, everything's all evenly rotated. So, now before we go any further, let's go ahead and start naming these bones because we like to keep them nice and uniform with all the other rigs we've ever built. So let's call this one head, and then we'll grab this one, call this one waist, and this one can be thorax. There we go. And then this will be, we'll call this one leg 1. Actually, let's see, leg segment 1. I don't need to spell out. What can I name this? Leg. We'll just say leg A. Okay. And then, see, this is part of this new naming thing I'm trying to come up with here. Leg A. We'll call this one leg B. Okay. Grab that one. Leg C. Okay. Grab that one. Leg D. And obviously leg E. Okay. And now I'm going to copy this leg E, Shift D, duplicate it, Control Alt S, scale it up, and we're going to give this one IK leg. Okay. Now, let's turn off the X's. It's kind of distracting. Actually, I need to... Let's do one more thing here before I explain my naming convention there. Let's put a Shift S, put the cursor at the center of the whole scene, which is going to be right there directly underneath our spider. And we're going to Shift A, add another bone, grab this one, name it Master. It's going to be our Master Control bone for moving the guy around. And Control Alt S, make it quite a bit bigger, kind of be a platform that he's standing on. And then grab the tip of it, move it down on the Z-axis. Okay, like so. Alright, now let's grab the head and that IK bone, and then shift select the main control, Control P, keep the offset. So now anytime we move it around, you can see. And we also need to parent that guy to the head. Keep the offset. Okay, so now the head will move it around, and this is going to be our IK chain to control the legs, and it'll move along with the body. Okay, so tell you what, let's go ahead and apply that control bone to the armature, the IK controls. First thing I want to do is grab the IK, shift select that foot, Control Shift C, and we're going to copy the rotation. There we go. And then grab that bone, shift select the next bone, Shift I, add IK to the active bone. Good. Grab that new bone, or not the new bone, but the yellow bone there, and go to our bone constraints and change the length up to 4. Okay, so now when we move that guy around, it's going to move the whole leg, like so. Good. Okay, now, the naming convention that I gave it. The reason I just put leg A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth is to kind of save some time, because when you copy something, Blender automatically puts a .001, 002, so on and so forth at the end of the name. So, I think that might save us some time. So let me copy this up here, and then we'll just rotate it around. Put it up on the, get it to match the other leg there. Good. And that's about right. And let's Control N, recalculate the Z-axis so it gets them all. When you rotate them around in the scene like so, it kind of distorts them a little bit, rotates them oddly. Okay, Control N, make sure everything's good. There we go. Shift D, and put that up here. And Control N, Z-axis. Okay, so now you can see that it went ahead and named them all .01 or 001, .002, .003. So now we have our leg 1, 2, and 3. So kind of save some time on the naming. But now all we got to do is just jump in here and put a .L to signify the left side. So let's copy that .L, Control C, and just on each bone, just put in here. Oops. There we go. Did I get that one? It did not. There we go. Oops. Grab the right bone. There we are. Okay, so this is a little bit faster than having to go in there and type, oh, this is leg 2, this is leg 3, you know, so on and so forth. So kind of use the sometimes annoying, the sometimes annoying feature of the .001 and so on and forth, using it to our advantage. Okay, almost there. Did it grab that name? It did, okay. Oops. Escape out if you hit the wrong button there. And the front leg originally. And boom, all set. Now, before we copy those over, we need to go ahead and put a couple of bones in here for our mandibles. So, let's put our 3D cursor right there where it needs to go. Jump this to the side view, put it up there, and that's about right. Maybe a little bit there. Okay. And let's Shift A, add a new bone, and let's drag it out to about where it looks like it needs to go there. Drag it down to the tip, grab it, subdivide once, drag it up to there. There we go. And go to top view, line it back up. Grab those, Control N, recalculate the roll. There we are. And this one, I need to kind of do it manually. Just Control R and just turn on our axes so we can see exactly. Actually, need to do that over here. Axes, there we go. And let's rotate it around to where the Z is pointing out. There we go. Okay, so let's name this one Mand1A. Oops, need the .L, I guess. .L, there we go. And then Mand1B.L. And then let's grab both of those, go to our top view, Shift D, duplicate them over, rotate them around a little bit, scale them down, and Control Alt S, make them a little skinnier as well, and move them down to match the smaller mandibles. Grab the tip of it down a little bit further, up a little bit. Okay, so now we'll rename this one to Mandible 2. Delete the .001, like I was talking about, this sometimes annoying bit when we have the name for the bone up at towards the beginning. we got to delete that off of there whenever we make copies. So let's Control R, rotate that to match up. There we go. And I think we're pretty well set. Well, actually, first we need to grab these two, Shift select the head, Control P, and keep the offset. Oh, and I was going to put another IK controller there on this bone, but it's only got two, so you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. So let's turn off the axes again, and let's go to our top view. Grab this middle head bone. Don't Shift D, undo that. Shift S, cursor to selected. There we go. And now let's grab all these bones we just made. Right there. Okay. And now we're going to Shift D to duplicate them. Just go ahead and click to lock it in. Hit the period button to rotate around the 3D cursor. S, X, -1. So we're scaling on the X-axis -1 times. And now we need to go to armature, flip names. So these should all have the .R at the end. There we go. Okay. Now let's turn on the X-axis mirror over here. And let's select all these guys here on the left again. Now we could just select them and do the Control N and recalculate the bone roll to Z axis, but as we know from our little mandibles here, it won't work on those two bones there. So we grab those all and hit Control R. It immediately pops those other bones into the right position. We just click out. Although it looks like these guys here are not. Let's grab those and then Control N, Z axis. There we go. Okay, so now I think our rig is pretty well set. Let's grab the head here, and yeah. Kind of looks weird with the spider not moving along with it, but we'll get that set up shortly. Okay, so let's hope I'm not freaking any people out with the little test movements I'm doing there. Apologize if you're afraid of spiders. I myself am more afraid of snakes, but spiders don't bother me too much. But okay, so we got our rig pretty well created. Let's grab our spider. We can go ahead and get in there and grab a hold of him. Zoom in here. It's hard to select. There we go. Underlying mesh when it's got a rig on top of it. So we've got our spider selected. Shift select any part of the rig. Control P and set with automatic weights. And now we can grab our head and move it around, and the spider it should follow. Okay. So now emails. Forgot to turn that off. Oh well. Almost done now. Okay, so our rig is all set up. But one thing we need to do, if we were to put him in a cool pose now, say something like that, and look through our camera and render it, the particle hair is going to be kind of odd. Let me go ahead and pause the recorder here so you can see that as soon as it renders. Hold on. Okay, you can see where the armature is deforming the actual rig, the actual mesh, but all the particle hair is still in its original location. And that's because we have to, tell you what, we got our rig all created. Let's turn that to object mode real quick and move it to that layer there. And actually it had the mesh selected as well. So let's move that back to the first layer. So now we have our mesh and everything else on this layer, and then our rig down here. So helps. Like if you want to select the body, you can just turn that layer off that has the rig on it. So okay, we got our spider mesh selected. Go back to our modifiers, and the reason that the particles didn't move along with them is because the armature is set at the bottom of the stack here. Pardon me. We need to bump it up above to where the particle system is at the bottom of the stack. So let's go ahead and name this Spider Fuzzies. Okay, so now File, Save. We should be pretty well good to go. I'll go ahead and render, and let me pause the recorder so you gotta wait. Stand by. Okay, now it's rendering the particle hair where it should be. And our spider is in a kind of a neat little pose there. One thing you might notice is you might have some little white lines, like right there. You can see it right there. between your mesh and your particle here. Now, the only way that I know of to fix that issue is to go ahead and turn this, go ahead and close that out. Go to your render settings, and down here under anti-aliasing, turn on full sample. Now if you leave it at 8, it's going to take it a little bit longer to render, because basically it renders it out and then kind of does a scene, you know, kind of analyzes it and gives it 8 levels of kind of a blurring effect, if that makes sense, and applies the anti-aliasing to that. 5 works for me, so we'll just go ahead and set 5. And before we render again, let's go ahead and turn the layer on that has the rig. Grab that said rig and set it back to pose mode. And let's kind of put our spider in a cool little pose here. Let's put his body here pretty close to the ground, about like so. Maybe move those mandibles up. One thing we can do, like I was about to put the IK controls on there, we can do what's called auto IK, and that's going to be over here under our, there we go, at the very bottom of your pose tools, auto IK. So now we just grab the tip of it and just move it, and it kind of turns it into, it kind of looks like it has the auto IK set turned on, like so, and you can just kind of move it around. Now that works pretty well, but I wouldn't recommend it for things like legs, because while it works to pose it out in space like this, it doesn't allow you to keep the tips of your chains there on the ground. So that's why I didn't add it to these particular ones. So anyways, okay, so let's put our spider in a cool pose. Grab that head again. Oh, let's turn off the rotate around the 3D cursor, control comma. There we go. Let's put him pretty close to the ground, and let's have his buttocks area, thorax, kind of perched up. There we go. And then we'll move these back legs a little further back, like so. And then maybe these legs can come back a little bit closer in. Oops. Top view. There we go. So that's him kind of just all drawn up, but let's put him in a cool pose. And the way we do that is a spider has 8 legs, but it's kind of similar to like a dog or a cat. Whenever they're walking, they lift the opposite legs, like their front left leg and their rear right leg lift and walk, and then the opposite legs to take the next step. So the spider's kind of the same way, it's just kind of doubled up. So if his front left leg is down, let's move it up there like he's getting ready to take a step. Then his right front leg, or if his left front leg is up, his right front leg has to be down. Kind of helps with the balancing effect. And then the opposite for the next foot. Like so. And then the second foot has to be down. But then the third foot can also be up. And then the rear right on this guy. Okay, so we got that. The body's kind of just down there flat. Let's give it kind of an aggressive angle. Maybe like so, and then set that mandible back up. Okay, so now we got a pretty cool pose there. Let's set our camera up a little bit at a better angle. And tell you what we can do. Let's grab our object data for our camera, and right now the lens focal length is at 35, and that's set to be 35 millimeters if you're a camera lens buff, knowledgeable person. I don't know. So if we make it further down, let's try say 20. It almost gives it like a fisheye effect. So you can have, like if you're wanting to make like a scary render, you can do this, and it'll make it kind of give it what's called a forced perspective. I can grab that. Let's go ahead and turn that layer off. So kind of give it a forced perspective to where like the front legs will look a little bit closer and then the back legs will look a little bit further. You see that effect in comic books and such a lot. So, let's zoom in here. Okay, so you're down on the spider's level and he's coming at you. Might want to make this leg a little bit less straight out. Okay, so now we're pretty well set. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'll go ahead and hit render, and I'll pause the recorder so you don't got to sit here and watch it render, so I'll be right back. Okay, now it's rendering, and you can see it's kind of it did not have anti-aliasing on it until this at the very end here, but you can see that took care of the white lines around there. Now we've got some odd things going on here. I guess that's the edge of the mandibles there, but looks like a straight line across there. So you can play with the settings a little bit to get it render a little bit nicer. Let me go ahead and try that real quick before I waste any more of your time. I say waste time before I spend any more. Not just because I'm spending it doesn't necessarily mean I'm wasting it. Grab that light controller up there. There we go. And let's move that spotlight more kind of above, and we'll do above and to the right. Maybe a little bit to the front as well. Okay. So, go ahead and save this, and I'll render, and again, pause the recorder so you don't have to watch. Okay, there we go. That looks a little bit better. I got some glitteriness on the eyeballs there. So, it kind of gets all crumpled together since all the colors are a lot alike, but if we were to animate this guy, put him into some motion, it would really make those legs look a little bit better. So let's just put maybe at an angle, maybe looking down at him. Instead of him coming at you, I'll just look down at him. And right now I'm just kind of playing with it. So as far as the tutorial goes, we'll pretty well call it done. And let me go ahead and render out this one last time before I say goodbye. So let me go ahead and render that, and I'll be right back. Okay, now it's about done rendering there, and you can see at a different angle the legs are a little better visible, if that makes sense. Looks like some of them are kind of crossing over each other, but maybe not. It's hard to tell. Hard to tell the fur is the same color, but so anyways, well, that's a spider for you. That's a tarantula guy. You can make them, black and gray instead of brown and tan or whatever, but quick, I don't know, 80 minutes now. Easy way to make a nice tarantula. So thank you for watching, and I'd like to see anything you guys come up with in our new user galleries. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.